Okay, so picture this. Asagaya Pearl Center looks, at first glance, like any other Tokyo shopping street. A greengrocer, a pharmacy, a coffee shop. The kind of place locals pass through without thinking twice. But this arcade has another side to it. By the 1930s, Osamu Dazai was living and walking these streets. Asagaya Station opened in 1922. Before that, this was just farmland on the outskirts of Tokyo. When the Kobu Railway, the predecessor of today's Chuo Line, was being laid, a route along the major road was considered, but a combination of local opposition and engineering challenges, including the steep gradients of the old highway, brought the line to where it runs today, cutting a straight path through the Musashino Plateau. Asagaya suddenly became part of the city's story. Then, the following year, everything changed. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 devastated central Tokyo. In the months that followed, thousands of people moved outward, searching for somewhere cheaper, quieter, easier to rebuild a life. Asagaya had a station, affordable rents, and a reasonable commute into the city. Among those who came were writers. Masuji Ibuse settled in the area in the late 1920s, and over the following years, he became the gravitational center of a literary community, unlike anything this neighborhood had seen before. The hub of that community was the home of poet Aoyagi Mizuho. Writers would gather there, reading manuscripts aloud, arguing over each other's work, drinking late into the night. This was the Asagaya Kai, the Asagaya Literary Circle. Among those who lent their names to the group were Osamu Dazai, Shigeru Tonomura, Shohei Kiyama, and Shigeru Nakano, a roster that reads, in retrospect, like a who's who of mid-century Japanese literature assembled in a single suburban neighborhood. But it wasn't all serious literary debate. There was also the Asagaya Shogi Kai, the Asagaya Shogi Club. Shogi is a Japanese strategy game often compared to chess, and in this neighborhood it became another excuse for writers to gather. Records from the time list Ibuse, Dazai, Aoyagi, Tonomura, and Kiyama among its members. The games were played in local restaurants and tatami rooms, and after the boards were put away, the group would move on to reportedly a nearby restaurant, where the conversation and the drinking continued. Ibuse later wrote about these years in his memoir, Ogikubo Fudoki. Reading it, you get a sense of how dense and alive those gatherings were, a small pocket of the city where literature was being made in real time. But the mood shifted. As Japan moved deeper into wartime, the authorities grew suspicious of intellectual gatherings. The Asagaya Kai couldn't continue under its own name. The group quietly changed its name, a small, careful act of self-preservation in a country where even the title of a literary circle had to sound harmless. Then came 1945. In the final months of the war, large sections of Asagaya's south side were deliberately demolished. It was a policy called Tatemono Sokai, the forced clearance of buildings to create fire breaks, preventing flames from spreading in the event of air raids. The streets that Dazai and Ibuse had walked through, the houses where they'd argued about literature over sake, physically gone. The literary village that had defined Asagaya for 2 decades simply ceased to exist. Through all of it, one structure remained untouched. Asagaya Shinmegu Shrine, which according to shrine tradition traces its founding to the 1190s, had stood on this land for 7 centuries before the writers arrived. It stood there still. After the war ended, the shopkeepers came back. They returned to a neighborhood that had been partially destroyed, and they started again. By 1951, a merchants' association had been formed. The following year, they took the step of closing the street to vehicles. An early pedestrianized shopping street in post-war Tokyo. Then came the problem of summer. In August, when the heat settled over the city, foot traffic dropped. The shops needed something to bring people in. In 1954, a group of local merchants organized the first Asagaya Tanabata festival. They looked to Sendai's famous Tanabata for inspiration, but Asagaya made it their own. The decorations, massive papier-mâché figures, handmade by shopkeepers and local residents, became the festival's defining feature, suspended from the arcade ceiling, vivid and strange and completely handcrafted. They turned the shopping street into something between a gallery and a carnival. In 1960, the merchants held a competition to name their shopping street. The winning entry was Pearl Center, chosen for the image of pearls glowing and strung together like a necklace binding the community. 2 years later, in 1962, the arcade roof was completed. The writers had helped shape Asagaya's first identity. The shopkeepers had built its second. If Pearl Center defines the south exit, Star Road defines the north. It's a nickname, and the origin is not clearly documented, but the street itself has a character that's easy to read. Independent restaurants, secondhand bookshops, small bars with handwritten menus in the window. Against Pearl Center's organized covered arcade, Star Road is denser, messier, more improvised. In some ways, it feels like a continuation of what the Asagaya literary circle was doing in the 1930s, a place without fixed rules, where people gather and something unpredictable happens. That's a speculative reading, but it's hard to walk through and not feel the echo. The two sides of the station divide Asagaya into 2 distinct personalities: south, curated, communal, festival-ready; north, informal, individual, open late. Together, they make a neighborhood that has resisted becoming just one thing. In 2019, a land readjustment project was announced for the area northeast of Asagaya Station. Construction and rezoning are expected to reshape the neighborhood through the 2030s. Urban change doesn't pause for history. It never has. Not here, not anywhere in Tokyo. But there are people trying to hold something in place. In 2002, a group came together to form the new Asagaya Literary Circle, reviving the spirit of the name that Ibuse and Dazai had made famous 7 decades earlier. It's a modest gesture, perhaps, but it says something about a neighborhood that keeps returning to its own story. Pearl Center, the Tanabata Festival, Star Road, none of what makes Asagaya recognizable was designed by a single planner or handed down from above. It accumulated piece by piece through the decisions of writers who needed cheap rent, shopkeepers who needed summer customers, and residents who wanted somewhere worth coming back to. Whether the next version of Asagaya holds any of that, that's the question the neighborhood is currently answering. If you made it this far, thank you. If you want to see more stories like this, from the parts of Japan that don't make it into the travel guides, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.